Hello, welcome back to another episode of I'm Not Triggered, the podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Purchase, and I'm so glad you're here today because today I'm going to help you get your shit together. We're going to talk about boundaries. Let's jump in. Now, before we begin, I just want to remind you that if you're curious about anything that we talk about in this episode today, you're going to be able to find all the information and the research that I refer to in this episode in a longer form newsletter post on my Substack, and that link is always in the description below. So, what are boundaries? We hear that word a lot, right? Like we talk about setting boundaries, and it's good to have boundaries, but what are they really? So, conceptually, we can think of boundaries like fences, but with a gate. And we get to decide where the fence is placed, how big it is. We get to decide how many gates there are, when they're open and when they're closed. We get to decide who is allowed in and out of our fenced area. And boundaries are a way of protecting ourselves. And boundaries are really important because not only do they help protect our mental health, they also help protect our self-respect and our sense of self-trust. Having effective boundaries allows us to have a really good grasp on the foundation of who we are at our core. When we have boundaries, that is a way of saying to ourselves, I have boundaries because I love myself, I like myself, I want to keep myself safe. And boundaries are always purposeful. We come up with our boundary implementations in our wise mind, right? And if you missed that episode, I'll link it for you here. Now, boundaries also help prevent burnout, which is actually a really huge problem in today's society of constant creation and constant production of things, right? Boundaries also improve our relationships across all areas of life, and it improves the relationship we have with ourselves. But there are a few different types of boundaries. So what are they? Well, there's several. So we're going to go through a few examples of each. The first type of boundaries are physical boundaries. Now, these boundaries are about setting limits around our personal space, our body, our environment, our physical comfort, and this also includes sexual boundaries as well. Some examples of physical boundaries are, I need you to knock before entering my room. I prefer handshakes instead of hugs when I meet new people. I need 7 hours of sleep so I don't schedule late night calls. I don't feel comfortable sharing my phone or my laptop with other people. Those are great examples of physical boundaries. The next type of boundaries are emotional boundaries. And these boundaries are all about separating our feelings from other people's, and they help protect our own emotional energy. So examples of emotional boundaries include, I can listen to your problem, but I cannot take responsibility for solving it. When you raise your voice, I need to step away from the conversation. I need time to process criticism before discussing it further. I cannot be your only source of emotional support. Those are really clear examples of emotional boundaries. And now we have intellectual boundaries. And intellectual boundaries are all about honoring our thoughts, our beliefs, and our feelings while also respecting others. Some really good examples of intellectual boundaries include saying things like, I'm open to discussing politics, but not if the conversation becomes personal attacks. Let's see, another one is, please don't dismiss my ideas without considering them. I respect your opinion, but I need the same respect for mine, even when we disagree. Or, I need to form my own conclusions after researching both sides of an issue. Those are really great examples of intellectual boundaries and honoring our own thoughts, perspectives, and beliefs. Then there are social boundaries, and these are limits around social interactions and relationships. So examples of these include things like, I need to decline social invitations at least twice a month to recharge. Or I keep my work relationships and personal relationships separate. I don't discuss family matters with acquaintances. Or I limit my social media time to protect my mental health. Those are great examples of social boundaries. So now that we've covered what boundaries are and the different types of them, I can now talk to you about how having effective boundaries helps create consistency. And what I mean by that is maintaining boundaries shapes who we are. Having effective boundaries is all about being in alignment with what we value. When we set a boundary that's, I don't work on weekends. I don't check work phone. I don't check work emails on weekends. That's very clear, and that keeps a very clear work-life balance boundary for ourselves, which protects our family time, it protects our work time, and it helps protect our emotional energy. We know where that energy is going to go. Boundaries also create consistency because they make making decisions easier. So when we have clear boundaries, our choices are streamlined because we've created predetermined limits around them. Like, I don't spend more than $50 on impulse purchases, or I only shop on Amazon once a week. And boundaries are also great because it helps reinforce who we are, our identity. Each time we honor a boundary of ours, we say to ourselves, I speak up for myself, I advocate for myself, I protect myself, I care for myself. And we reinforce our identity as being someone worth being heard, worth being seen, worth being considered. And boundaries also help with behavioral congruence because when our words and our actions match the boundaries that we set, building trust with ourselves and others is much easier because we and they know what to expect. And when we consistently honor our boundaries, we're actually reinforcing and reforming what our identity really is. And these boundaries literally transform how we see ourselves, how we're treated, and how our relationships function. But how do boundaries do all that? That's a lot of great things for something that seems kind of easy, right? But it's not. Setting boundaries is very difficult. And we're going to get to that. We're going to talk about why. But first, I want to talk to you about how boundaries actually do this work. They work because they reduce cognitive dissonance. And what I mean by that is without clear boundaries, we act against our values. And that, in the long term, creates a lot of internal conflict, which causes a lot of distress. And all of that can be alleviated by doing the hard thing, which is setting boundaries. Boundaries also build self-trust, right? Because when we honor our boundaries, we're proving to ourselves that our needs matter. And they create predictability. And if you have mental health issues, predictability is actually pretty important to be able to really thrive in daily life. Life is unpredictable enough. We don't need to make it more so, right? Having boundaries helps create consistency and predictability in our schedules and our days and our energy levels. And boundaries also form our self-concept because when we develop clarity about who we are and who we are not, what we will accept and what we will not, that's really great information that helps us solidify our identity. Now, I said earlier that setting boundaries is hard. We all know that because if it was easy, I wouldn't make this episode, right? We would all be masters at it. Even I have a hard time setting and maintaining boundaries. For sure I do. Why is that? Well, setting boundaries is great for us. We already know that, right? But there's always the fear of rejection, that the fear of setting boundaries will lead to rejection or conflict. Or there's guilt and maybe obligation that make it very difficult to set boundaries. Then there are the cultural and social norms and societal expectations, which can also influence how boundaries are perceived and respected. And then there's always the discomfort of setting boundaries and learning to tolerate that discomfort. At first, setting boundaries feels a lot like swallowing sand. But I promise you, by the end of this episode, you'll still be swallowing sand. It just won't be as hard to do. So, how do we set boundaries? Well, lucky for us, there's a tool, which I'm pulling, of course, from Dialectical Behavior Therapy, DBT, which was created by Marshall Linehan. And this tool has now been used across all types of therapeutic modalities. I learned about this tool years ago, and I'm only really recently starting to use it in a way that works for me And I want to give you the formula that will help you set boundaries even when it's hard, in a way that gets heard, that gets respected. We're going to do that using this DBT skill called Dear Man. So Dear Man is a framework for assertive communication that balances self-respect with relationship maintenance. And this skill gives us a step-by-step approach to navigating difficult or emotional conversations. And of course, it's an acronym, like most of the DBT skills. Now, before we get too much further into Dear Man, I just want to remind you to go ahead and subscribe and like the video so other people can find it. My channel is still pretty new, and I love that you guys are here and watching. Thank you so much for your support. Now, we're going to go through several examples using Dear Man. We're going to go through a workplace example, a relationship example, and a familial example, and I think a friendship example too. So you can follow me along and as we walk through these different scenarios together. Okay, so let's start with the basics. So Dear Man, what does it stand for? So D is to describe the situation objectively. And then E, we express our feelings and our opinions about the situation. Then we assert our boundaries clearly. We can reinforce by explaining the benefits for the other person, respecting our boundary. And then, of course, for us, the last three are here for us. We need to proceed mindfully by staying focused on the goal of our conversation, which is, what are we trying to get out of this? Dear Man is for asking or making a request. Now, A is for appearing confident. We don't look down, we don't shrink ourselves, we don't talk really small, no one can hear us. We're going to say what we need to say assertively, respectfully, and we're going to be done. And then with N, we can negotiate if necessary, right? Now, it might seem a little overwhelming right now, but we're going to break it down with these several scenarios, okay? So this first one is a workplace example. I just made these up. And in this scenario, let's say that our boss at work keeps asking us to stay late without prior notice. So our describe here is, I've noticed that 3 times this month, I've been asked to stay late with less than 1 hour's notice. Our express is, while I'm committed to our team's success, these unexpected schedule changes disrupt important family commitments and create stress at home. Our A here is, I need at least 24 hours notice when late work will be required so I can make proper arrangements. Then we can reinforce by saying, with adequate notice, I can arrange childcare and adjust my family plans, which means I'll be fully focused on work rather than worried about my family when I do stay late. So our MAN phase is for us, right? So the M here, again, is staying mindful. We stay on topic. So if your boss is bringing up other issues like project deadlines or our coworkers' willingness to stay late, we can return to our specific boundary about notice rather than getting pulled into justifying our family priority time. We simply restate the boundary. I need at least 24 hours notice when late work will be required. The A here for appearing confident, this one's always the same. We stand up straight. We use our regular voice. We just talk plain and clear, right? We look people in the eyes. Then we can negotiate if our boss comes back and say, has something to say about this. Then we could say, I understand urgent situations arise, and I'm totally willing to work late when that happens. Perhaps we could identify which upcoming projects might require late work so that I can plan ahead, or we could establish a rotating late shift schedule for unexpected situations. Now, at no point are we apologizing for setting this boundary or saying things like, I really hope this isn't inconvenient for you. Oh, we really hate to bother you. I hope this is okay. We don't say any of that shit. We just stick to the script. That's why we write a script, is so that we don't undermine ourselves accidentally and give away our power. Then we don't get what we want because we're feeling guilty and weird about having boundaries. But the point is to deal with that discomfort and advocate for ourselves and for what we need. for what we're asking for. Now, let's just play devil's advocate here and say that our boss is not going great, right? Let's say it didn't really work out and we keep getting asked to stay at work late without notice. In this scenario, we could say something like this. I see that we have another last minute request to stay late. As we discussed previously, I need advance notice. So I can stay today until 5:30 to help transition that work, but then I need to leave. I'm happy to come in early to help catch up, or we can discuss setting up a system for handling these urgent situations that works better for everyone. Which would you prefer? Right? So we're not apologizing, we're not changing it, we're not making it seem like we're asking for too much. We're still requesting the same thing and sticking to our boundary even when it's hard. So this next one is a relationship example. And here it's going to be about our partner is always late. So here's our dear phase, our D. In the past month, there have been occasions where you've arrived late to our planned outings without texting me or calling me about the delay. Our express, when this happens, I feel unimportant, I feel anxious, and I sit alone wondering where you are and when you're going to be here. And then we assert. We say, I need you to either arrive on time or get a hold of me when you're going to be late. Then we reinforce by saying, which would allow me to either make small adjustments to my schedule or find something productive to do during a longer wait, rather than feeling frustrated or worried before we even start our time together. That's a great way to request that somebody be a bit more aware of their time and how their lack of punctuality is affecting your own time. So the man phase here again, right? Very simple. If our partner brings up times that we were late or other relationship issues, we just redirect back. We say things like, I understand that we have other issues that we could discuss and need to work on, but right now I want to focus on punctuality because this is important to me. We appear confident. We use a warm but clear tone. We maintain eye contact. And we don't minimize our feelings by saying things like, it's not a big deal, or I know this is silly, right? And then if we have to, we can negotiate. I understand you have a demanding job and traffic is unpredictable. Would it help if we set our time to meet 15 minutes later? Or would you prefer to be the one to pick the time and place so that we can plan around your work schedule? Simple, right? Now, if this boundary is not respected, but we want to reinforce it, what could we say in this instance? We could say something like, let's say our partner's late again, okay? We could text them something like, or call them and say, hey, I noticed it's 7:45. We planned to meet at 7, but I haven't received any messages or calls from you. And as we talked about before, without information, I'm not willing to sit and wait and feel anxious and feel anxious and unvalued. I've been here waiting, so I'm gonna head home now. I care about you a lot, but I also need to honor my own time and my own needs. I'd really like to reschedule for another day when we can both prioritize being on time and communicating clearly about any delays. Now, our last example is a family example. And this one is about setting boundaries with the parent, talking about triggering topics, okay? So let's say for instance here, our dear phase, the D here would be, during our previous conversations, you've been bringing up and you can say the topic that's been brought up, despite my previous request not to discuss that. Our express here then would be, when this topic is mentioned, I experience anxiety symptoms that affect my sleep and my focus for days afterward. The assert here is, I need our conversations to remain free of any mention of this topic or any events related to it. We reinforce this by saying, this would allow me to enjoy our time together without anxiety and maintain a closer relationship with you without compromising my mental health. Now our man phase here, right? So the M, if our parent, let's say, tries to justify mentioning this topic where they minimize our reaction, we could say something like, I understand you may have different feelings about this, but I'm communicating about the effect these conversations have on me. And we appear confident, always. We can be very gentle, but we can be firm. We can avoid apologizing for having this boundary. So we can use phrases that show resolve. Things like, this is important for my well-being, rather than, I hope this isn't too much to ask. Okay? And then we negotiate if we have to. If you feel there's something critical I should know involving this topic, perhaps you could ask me if I'm in a frame of mind to discuss it first. Now let's say that boundary is disrespected again. We can reinforce it by saying something like, you've brought the topic up again, which is something that I've clearly explained is harmful to my mental health. I love you very much, but I need to protect myself. So I'm going to end our conversation or our time together today, and I hope we can talk again next week. If we want to, we could also say something like, I need you to commit to respecting my boundaries. I know that it's difficult, but it's for my mental health. So all these examples of Dear Man just show how Dear Man works in specific situations, but boundaries are not meant to be rigid and written in stone. They're kind of like written in sand. And boundaries evolve as we evolve, as our relationships evolve. So let's talk about healthy boundaries being flexible and also firm. Boundaries are definitely movable and they're adaptive. So boundaries naturally shift as we heal, we grow, and we build stronger relationships. And boundaries are different contextually. So one relationship will need different boundaries than another, right? We don't have the same boundaries with our kids that we do with our parents, right? Then there's the renegotiating of these boundaries. And we have to do this because it's about revisiting and updating these commitments that we've made to ourselves, right? Now, what's really awesome about learning to sit with the discomfort and the guilt of setting boundaries is over time, the guilt will probably still be there sometimes. It won't be as big, that's for sure, or as loud, however you want to put it. But something really amazing does happen, which is it becomes easier to do. Self-respect becomes easier to have. It's not something we have to chase down and work so hard to dig from ourselves. And we start to really feel a sense of self-trust because we've been honoring our boundaries. And we're picking relationships that also honor and respect our boundaries. That's incredibly important. If your relationships continually disrespect your boundaries, it's probably time to consider stepping away or distancing yourself from or in that relationship. Because boundaries are needed to have safety. And if we want to have authentic, true, real, intimate friendships, relationships, we have to be respectful of boundaries. So that's what I got for you today. I hope that you learned something useful and that you can use this Dear Man skill in your own life and apply it to all areas of your life. Let me know what you liked and what spoke to you. I'd love to hear from you. You can always shoot me an email. Check out my Substack newsletter in the description below. And until next time, take good care of yourself.